Everybody, my name is Mozzie. I'm your host. I'm here with Omar Caesar, and this is the first episode of the Uncut Roots podcast. So we're just going to get started right away, and thank you so much for being here and
Oh,
letting us do
pleasure.
this podcast.
Pleasure's mine.
So first, we're just going to open it up. What has representing like the African American community here in Orange County been like for you?
Well, it's been, I mean, for be honest, it's obviously it's very scarce, right? There's not many of us, and so that obviously brings a certain amount of pressure, but it's also a good pressure. In my opinion, I always say, when they say pressure burst pipes, right? In this scenario, it makes it where because you are, you know, literally the minority, you have to bring the culture with you. So you also have to represent it well, which to me is, I mean, it's the biggest blessing you get to do, right? So you get to represent it well to show people exactly, like what we're about, and then also that, bring a positive image and also be able to showcase to a lot of people out here who maybe have like a preconceived notion of, oh, okay, this is how African Americans are. It's like, well, listen, we all the same. Obviously we all come from different backgrounds and represent different cultures, but to me, it's like where I feel like it's a blessing to be able to, to kind of be that, that minority in a area like that.
Mhm. And would you say for you it was sort of a culture shock or maybe like very different moving here from New York? Because for people like me, we've been born and raised here, so it's been sort of like the norm to be sort of the minority and be maybe underrepresented. How was that for you?
Wow, it was huge. Like it was way different. It was. I mean, comparison to New York, right? New York is very much, I mean, it's metropolitan, right? You have so many different cultures. It's a melting pot. You got everybody's all scattered around in one area. So to do that and then to come out here, and it's like, now it's like, no, you're here and ain't much of you out here, and you have to, then also just the environment too, right? You're also used to, riding a bus a little bit more, people walking, just a lot more noise, and so that part to me was a really hard transition at first.
Yeah.
Definitely took me some time. Took me, I would say, at least within the first 2 years to really even settle out. Where I was like, okay, I'm here, and I'm gonna try to build my roots here. But not to tell you the truth, yeah, probably the first year. I mean, shoot, I was going to New York almost like every 3 months, just like, yo, I'm sliding back, man. I ain't staying. Like I was out of here, man. So yeah, it was definitely a culture shock for sure.
So growing up was in New York was like your culture within your household shared pretty much along your community, or was it kind of different?
So like my community, so I'm Panamanian. So in Brooklyn, a lot of West Indies. So you had like people from Panama. Like most of my family from Panama, they end up settling down in Brooklyn. So that made it a little bit easier for, I'll say, for my family, because you had other families who were doing the same thing. And then in Long Island was where a little more spaced out. You had like your areas where mine, which was a little bit, it was mostly predominantly African American. But you did have like you can drive to another town, which is like 2 minutes away, and it's predominantly white. So kind of you go to different areas, and it'll be primarily Caucasian. Then you go another area, primarily Hispanic. But that yeah, that's kind of how the setup was in New York. So it's a little bit where and especially in the city, it's a lot more scattered out. Like everybody, I mean, everybody's everywhere. You got Spanish Harlem, you got all these different areas. But for the most part, I mean, everybody has to mesh together because you're riding the trains together, you're riding buses, and especially just even just walking up and down the street, like you have to mesh in with other cultures.
Yeah, and for the viewers, especially in the United States, African American culture or Black culture in general has mixed with a lot of different other traditions. So it's not just for African Americans that have been here for a long time. Afro Latino culture, African culture has all sort of mixed into this what is known as Black culture and has created a very diverse and rich cultural history. All right, so next question. Growing up playing football, was that like expected or was that pretty common for you?
So to tell you the truth, so I really picked up football a little bit later. I played a little bit as a kid, and then basketball was probably the most common in my area. So you think of kind of like sort of inner city, if you will, like that area. There's not crazy amount of resources, but it's a hoop. Like literally every corner you go to was a basketball hoop, basketball court, right? Tennis courts, handball courts. So that was kind of like the cheaper option, right? If you will. It's like, all right, we can go hoop. Like we ain't gotta, you know, get into a sport that maybe costs a little bit more. So but for me, I would say like football, I kind of got to a little bit later. And I would say around like middle of high school is when I really started to pick it up. But all through childhood was straight hoop, all basketball.
And growing up, what was sort of your dream? Like, what did you want to be or accomplish when you were growing up?
Man, I mean, I feel like I was like one of those kids who I just had like always had high expectations for myself and everything I did. So when I started playing basketball, it was all right. Well, I want to go to the NBA. Then it was like I play football. I want to go to the NFL. Then it was like all right, doing track. I want to be a track star, right? So my mindset it was kind of shifted. It was never really like I want to do this. I mean even at one point, right? I was even like shoot, I might even want to be a lawyer. So any kind of direction I went to was always going to be where I'm gonna give it 110% and then try to get to the top level. So yeah, to answer your question, it was a multitude of things. It wasn't necessarily just one, but yeah, each one was I wanted to make it to the top.
And then what sort of spurred you to do this, having your own gym and stuff like that?
Well, so that happened as a result of, be honest with you, like when I moved out here, again, all my clientele, everything was over in New York. So when I got out here, it was really like starting from square one. So I just happened to I had a client who ended up playing at the Ladera Sports Center, and so I went there, kind of just like checked it out, and I guess I met somebody over there, and they were like, what do you do? And I was like, well, I do, speed and agility, things like that. And then so once I got in there, and then that's when I started accumulating a lot of kids just from doing those programs. And as my clientele built up, it eventually got to where it's like, all right, well, eventually it's gonna be time to, get my own place. And yeah, so it was just it kind of spurred from that, just from accumulating a lot of clientele and then being able to say, okay, I think it's time to, start my own show.
Yeah. And what sort of went into this another victory? What was the main, I guess, thought process or inspiration for that?
Oh, for another victory. So so my pops was like a huge uh Big Daddy Kane fan. I don't know for the viewers out there, if y'all know who he is, if y'all super young, check him out. He's an old school rapper, but so it was a song that he would play, and it would have that as the hook. It was like another victory, right? And another victory represented a lot of things, right? So where I grew up, right, you say, oh, another victory is like another win. Like it could be another score. It could be, all right, I came up with some money. I you know, anything like that where it was like you celebrated something you did. It was just like, all right, cool. You kind of tell, yeah, another victory.
Yeah.
So when it came to what I do, it kind of just flew right into it.
Okay.
Like every time a client comes in, whether it's again, you don't have to break a record or anything in here. You don't have to, you know, the victory in itself sometimes is just even showing up. So just even showing up, it's like, yo, recognize that was a victory for you. So every day you get up, it's really you're trying to chase that. You're trying to chase another victory, and then the amount of victory when you stack up all those victories on top of each other, man, it's just like it's like a brick, like kind of like what Nipsey said, right? Like building brick by brick, and eventually you build something. So it's the same way. You build up so many victories, eventually you're gonna build up something that's you're gonna be super proud to hold up.
Okay. All right. So next we'll go into like who in your community like were you doing it for, or who sort of like inspired you to do what you did?
So where I was from, there was a gentleman. His name was Jim Shep. Shout out to him and my guy JD John Dunlap. So they were kind of my first mentors. So when I was in high school, and I would go in there right to their gym, which eventually I started working at. They just, I mean, they made me like enjoy. I mean, I always enjoyed the process of working out, but they made me enjoy it to where I was like, to see the results of what I was doing. Man, it was like it was different. I had such a awesome experience with it that once I got to college, and I was kind of like right in between. I was still playing ball, And I also knew I wanted to do something else, but I wasn't sure. I was like, I don't want to go into like a regular job or like, no offense, but like, I just want to do the average norm. I want to do something I can actually get involved and like help kids the way they did with me. So they really kind of inspired me. So once I started working with them and I saw what their process was, the strategic, or strategies they would have in just, developing kids, I was like, man, that's something I want to do. So it just kind of happened organically like that, where just watching them do it, and then eventually I was like, all right, I want to do it, but I want to do it my own little flair too. So that was kind of like my mentors in that aspect.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, that's great. So then going into sort of, I guess, as you grew, and the name of the podcast is Uncut Roots. What roots or sort of cultural values do you think you grew growing up, and how have they matured over time?
Mm. I would say for me, like some of the things that I kind of grew to. Honestly, I think it was just being able, like, so one thing about, like, especially with Panamanian culture is we're very engaging. They're very engaging. They We love to dance. We love to, cook, like eat. A lot of home meals and things like that. So for me, what my culture kind of built up, from my roots was, one to always, look out for, your fellow people, right? And because a lot of Panamanians, when they came to the United States, sometimes, same thing, like same issues that some people have now. You don't have all your papers, and you're all right. And so sometimes you got to make that sacrifice of, all right, I'm gonna bring in my family member, from here. They're gonna stay with me, for a certain period of time, take care of them, and eventually, once they're able to get, their papers, all that stuff right, then they can go off on their own. But it was really big on, what I guess maybe kind of stemmed to my life, where it was like, hey, look, like you have, everybody doesn't have the same fair shake coming into the world. So you have to make it to, like, our biggest goals as people is honestly, or the best thing you could ever do, like kind of what Nipsey said too, is, to inspire, right? It's the best human act you can actually do. So to be able to have, so I think for that, like those roots of being able to see like certain family members come from Panama, stay at like some other cousins' houses, and it's just like, all right, they there for a while, and but it's like you're looking out for them, right? And because you got what you had to get, right? You came out, like my grandfather came out here. He was able to, secure a good job with the bank, and then same thing with my grandmother at the hospital. So once they got themselves established, it's like, okay, well, I can't leave my people back there. I'm doing well, but they struggling. So you started to bring them out, and then you started to teach them, English, right? And once they were able to get on their feet, and it was like, all right, now the whole family's doing well. Now I'm doing well. The
Yeah.
whole family's doing well. So to answer your question, I think those roots from my culture really influenced me to be like, okay, like if I see somebody that doesn't have maybe the same fair shake I got, or maybe I'm doing, I'm doing pretty well, but maybe they're struggling. Well, shoot, I can't let them go to the side either, even if they're not family. It's like, no, if I can help somebody, you step up and give them a shot too.
That's actually definitely been really popular with me too. My dad's from a smaller town in Central Valley, so for them it was always they were here, but always looking out for each other. And on the other side, my mom is an African American, but she came from Iran. Very similar sort of idea to you. It's definitely looking out for your people. I mean, they like ran here about 40, 50 years ago, and it was similar. My grandfather came here, probably one of the few, and then it's definitely just looking out for each other and making sure that everyone can eat.
Mm.
Because for us Iranians that came to Orange County, so a lot are here in Irvine and LA, so it's definitely been sort of a similar shared struggle between multiple cultures that it's you need a pioneer to get somewhere, but also then you have to turn around and help the people that allowed you to do that.
Mm. Mm. That's powerful, man. And your family's been out here. Yeah, I would say, how long your family been out here for?
Yeah, so my mom, both my parents moved down here. They were like originally from Orange County. My mom lived in LA after moving from Iran. So she's been here probably for about 30 years now. My dad's from Central Valley, near Merced, if you guys know where that is. And he moved up, played basketball in San Francisco, and then he came down here to work after meeting my mother. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, so you guys been out here for, I mean, quite some time.
Yeah. So I grew up here, Orange County, all 17 years. Family, same.
And I was gonna say, so I remember you asked me earlier. I'm gonna ask you, like, was there a, I guess for like, was there sort of like, as you kind of started, especially you started to get older, where you started to realize like, man, it's a little bit different out here than
Yeah.
they like, especially other areas. Maybe you had visited with family or,
Yeah.
you
It's
know,
definitely, I would say, been sort of growing up. I definitely felt like it just is how it is. Like I didn't really early on know that like there were places like New York, like Atlanta, where like I would be the majority. So growing up, I always kind of felt like it's just how it is. I'm just gonna be one of the few. In elementary, I was the like only black kid until middle school. Then I finally started to see others. But where my dad came from, being much more predominantly African American, and then visiting them and seeing that, it definitely is like spurred me to be like I can like achieve like a lifestyle where I can see my people succeed too.
mm,
I think so. That's definitely been huge, and my mom's culture has been much more like, immersed in it because they're here. So it's always been carrying on like my African American tradition and culture without necessarily being like directly connected to it all the time. You know what I'm saying?
yeah. I mean, what's cool too is like, I mean, you get two different cultures who, I've said for Iranian, right? Like, right, especially the time period right now, like a lot going on, So I'd like, how was that like being able to? Because obviously you have, like our own struggles here in our country, but then you're also seeing struggles in a whole nother country, right? And it's like you're also seeing like, especially with, you know, women's rights there, and like how's that been being able to, kind of again, like you're seeing a whole nother culture that's going through it too.
Yeah, it's kind of like a pull like push pull effect because like there will be moments like in 2020 with a lot of police brutality that I'll feel really connected to black culture because people are asking me about it. It's in the news, and then I have times like now where there's a lot of human rights issues going on in Iran, and people ask me what are like your people doing, and it's hard because it's like you don't relate to everyone in your culture
Mm.
because people even with the same skin as you or with the same maybe values as you, their ideas, whether it's religious or political, can be completely different.
Mm.
So it's definitely been like sort of eats at you that you have to represent when other people might not be, pulling their weight sometimes because the United States it's difficult to be an immigrant at times and when people are putting out a bad image, it definitely I think sort of takes away from like what could be.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of pressure, to that too, right? Like, to be like, say it's one thing to like you choose yourself to be a leader, is one thing, but then when it's like life is choosing you to be a leader, it's a whole different thing, right? Because sometimes you're doing something that you're not, again, like it was like ordained, right? And in those moments, right? It's like, okay, well, I can run from this challenge, right? Or I could be like some of the great leaders in the past, where it's like, nah, I'm gonna embrace it, and not only am I gonna embrace it, I'm gonna take it a step forward. I'm gonna be like, all right, let me see if I can move my people forward, and so that the next person coming up, I may only get them, if I get them like 12 steps, it's cool. But if I stop at that 12 steps and the goal is to get to 50 steps, well then, all right, cool. Now I can pass the torch on. Somebody else saw the 12 steps I took. Now I pass this torch, and now maybe they take it to the next 12 steps, whatever it is. All right, boom. Now we started off here, but now we're 24 steps in. We're much closer to our goal.
Yeah, it's definitely like a community process. And even if it's a few of you, like I go high school, I know a lot of my friends met a lot more African Americans, and it's definitely holding up a good image, because when you don't have a lot of representation, if you only have five people to represent who you are, and three are, you know, like we said, misrepresent, it
They
can
ain't
it
doing
can
it right.
hurt. It hurts you a lot.
For sure.
So it's definitely you're like you said, forced to sometimes step up and assume or like take in a role that you might not necessarily want, but it's important because it's like beyond yourself. It grows. Like if we can represent Orange County African Americans, then like that allows not just us but others to grow up here and progress like past
Mhm.
our lifetimes. And that I think what the most important part is that it's not just a one time process.
Right.
It's like since the '60s, that's only been hasn't even been 100 years yet. There's been so much progress, but it just needs to, keep like you said, another victory. Keep stacking your wins and make sure that you can progress to a society where we can all just see each other is equal and culture is one thing. It's just a diverse mix of everyone's different ideas, and it's it's just one society that we live in.
I would say for people, for a lot of people, man, just I tell people to embrace the challenge. Embrace being different. Whether you got one leg, whether you suffer from autism, you suffer from like we have a whole bunch of things that a lot of people suffer from, right? And you know, I would tell people, man, embrace the challenge, man. Embrace the challenge. Like God and I don't believe God makes mistakes. With challenges we're given. I think that we're chosen, if anything, right? Like every challenge we're chosen for it, and with that challenge, it's an opportunity. For me, I'm spiritual. I believe it's also to get us closer to the Most High, and I also feel like yeah, like that's God's way of also being able to give you that challenge so that somebody who's watching, because everybody's always watching, somebody's watching you, and they're like, all right, maybe they were afraid to take that challenge on, and then now all of a sudden they're like, okay, shoot, all right, he could do it, or she can do it. I could take that challenge on too, and they might even take it a step further, than what you did because again, you paved the way for them. So I'll just say that, man. Like in society, African Americans, definitely, be a person that paves roads, man. Like paving a road, you leave it to where somebody can, you know, again, like they can just keep paving, and now you built um, just a wonderful access for everybody to get onto.
Yeah, and work together for sure. Like we said, it's already a struggle in itself to get where we've gotten, and like whether you moved here, you grew up here, just you have a community, you have other people that are like minded. Work with them to help progress and grow what you guys want to, like what you want to be. If you guys want like a more you know different changing culture, be that person, be that group. Whether it's even if you only have one other friend that's African American, or you just have two people that share the same ideas, work together and try to grow your ideas like this podcast, like these interviews, so that you can achieve whatever goal that you might set for your community.
Mm.
And then I'll go into a question.
Mhm.
Would you say that either growing up or moving here, either or, have there been any of your roots that you feel like have tried to be trimmed by society, or even just sort of tried to not be acknowledged?
Well, I would say probably the biggest thing I noticed when I first moved out here was like even just like the lack of food, like lack of restaurants that have a lot of culture.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, like in comparison, right in New York, you can have a Jamaican restaurant here. The next door you have an Italian restaurant. The next door you have Middle Eastern cuisine, and you might have you have it all in the same lot. Like not even like you got to go here then go over. Like it's like boom, you can go right in the same lot. You get every type of food you want. So but that also builds culture too, right? So what I realized, I'm like, damn, like I feel like that was one of the things for me. I was like, that could be kind of like cutting off a little bit of culture too.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the first ways people can learn about your culture, right? If I can eat your food and your food tastes delicious, I might want to learn a little more about what you got. So I feel like what that was one of the biggest things for me was like, all right, there's not as much differences in food. It's you have like it's all kind of the same. So I was like, that's probably one of the areas for me. And I looked and I was like, all right, well, where is the nearest Panamanian restaurant? And I think it's like all the way in LA, right? It's like one. And I'm like, dude, like who, like that's cool maybe for me, but if I'm trying to, for people who want to learn more of the culture, they're not gonna drive way out there for that. So I feel like that was something where I was like, man, that for a lot of coaches, speaking for myself, but a lot of other coaches, that could be it kind of stifle you a little bit too as far as your growth because yeah, if you don't have a lot of restaurants or places that showcase your culture, well then how they gonna learn it?
Yeah, that's I didn't even think about that, but for sure, there's a lot of more like Italian, Mexican, or just classic sort of like traditional American restaurants here. Actually, one time I went to go get just some regular African food. I've had to drive all the way out to Santa Ana, like 35 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, some places like you said, it's not accessible, and that's like that's a mix of factors. There's not maybe a lot of a certain group of people. Like we don't have a lot of. Sometimes West Indies are sort of like under represented, or just there's a lack of them.
Mhm.
Here there's a lot more African Americans I've seen here moving from the South or from the Midwest, from the Bay Area. But yeah, for sure, it's definitely the food scene's really like
Nah, it's scary, man.
different. Yeah.
Like, yeah, if you're not willing to drive, if you ain't willing to travel, shoot, man, just I don't know, eat canes and in and out every day. I guess at that point, But yeah, it's you know you gonna learn nothing off of that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely the black-owned business and sort of cultural businesses are they're definitely growing. It's taken time. How does that feel for you to be one of the I would say one of the few or one of the first to sort of like pioneer and set the standard for like successful business?
I mean, it's an honor, like sometimes you get so caught up in your own work. Sometimes you don't. I'll be honest. Sometimes you don't really pay attention to it. Right, I'm one of those people who I'm just going through the grind, right? I'm just going through the grind, right? And then when I see, fellow African Americans, young African Americans like yourself, and I go to different schools and, automatically they're drawn to me, right? It's like, oh snap, like there's a coach and somebody that, you know, that looks like me, and thriving because you're so used to, people coming in through the door and they don't look like you. So sometimes it might in some people's minds, right, where they're like, oh well, I guess all coaches, they don't look like me,
Yeah,
or so for me, it's an honor, because again, I ain't gonna front. I love the shock factor. I love when people walk in and they're like, oh, who's the owner? And I'm like, you looking at him? It's me and my other gentleman here. Same thing. We're both African American, and it's a cool thing, because it's like, all right, again, you're representing, not only yourself, you're representing the whole culture, and to be one of the few, it just also means that you try something that most people were willing to try
yeah.
and stick your neck out to do it and represent it well. So I take it as an honor, man. I don't even. I just feel like again, something that's chosen. It wasn't just dropped on me.
Yeah, we appreciate that. I would say me, shout out my friends Asher, Zion, Gavin. We definitely like we playing basketball and they said, all right, you guys are gonna start working out with Coach Omar. But who's Omar? We obviously didn't know at the time. And we walked in the gym, see you, we're like, okay, like we can mess
All
with
right,
this
yeah,
because it's
we get down with this.
yeah, it's because it's definitely like the last thing we expected.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
with knowing where we're from and sort of just what the the scene looks like. That was like the last thing we expected. But it was huge to us that we are like, okay, like we see someone that's successful that's doing what we want to do. So it makes it so much easier for us to like aspire and be inspired to, like you said, make the leaps that we wouldn't have done without, the exposure to people like you and to like these opportunities. That's been really huge, I'd say, to us.
Man.
Thank you.
Well, shoot, I'll say humbly, man. Like that means a lot. I take a lot of pride in what I do, but to be able to again, like, to see you guys even, recognize it and to be like, it's a lot, man. So humbly, man, I thank y'all. That's a, I take that to the heart. That really means a lot for real.
Yeah,
So thank y'all too.
yeah, appreciate that.
We kind of keep it there for a second. I can ask you. What is it? Correct, because you talk about how kind of being a minority. Whether it's at your school. Um, I guess like what challenges do you see? Like what do you experience on a daily that sometimes makes you feel? Because I feel like sometimes when you're in a minority, right? There could be a lot of uncomfortable moments.
Yeah.
So maybe to the viewers, maybe they don't understand, and maybe to a lot of us who are African Americans who've been in that position, right? We going to schools and been the minority, right? What are some of the challenges that brings, or maybe some of the moments where you're like, ooh, this is tough. A lot of
Yeah.
people don't, a lot of other coaches don't really know.
Yeah, so I would say growing up, like being really, like I said, the only African American, I really only knew the culture that my dad directly taught me. So that was sort of interesting because I didn't even like couldn't see it as its own separate culture because I only got it from one person. It wasn't like a community or societal thing for me. But then growing up, like more and seeing other African Americans, it definitely like showed me that you have to be able to stick to your identity, and because it's really easy, especially somewhere like Orange County, or where if you go to a predominantly white institution or anything, you can sometimes sort of lose like what values you hold or lose yourself because you're not like around them.
Right.
Like if I'm it's just like a language. If you're not speaking like a native language with your family or something, like you'll start to forget it because you're just not, you know, sharing it or talking with your people, spreading your ideas all the time. So that definitely, I think, has been prevalent to me is that you got to make sure you hold on to that because, you know, it's sometimes the only thing that we have is our culture and that, helps us forever.
Mm, mm, man. Do you feel like I guess like around I guess in the community, right? Do you feel like there's like have you seen anywhere where you feel like all right, like it represents you?
I would say I think now in high school because now with the basketball scene, Orange County's growing a lot. SoCal's a huge basketball area, so between that being able to play and even just like connect to do interviews and podcasts with other people and see like us being able to start to succeed and grow like as individuals as adults, it's definitely I think stuck out to me more
Mm,
that we like can be successful and that there's now like I feel like we can grow and set the standard even more for people that grow up like us that may not know exactly their culture or be feel like they are not represented properly. I think like that's huge that now there can be a standard set for us to, you know, like aspire and
mm,
grow.
mm, man. Yeah, I think you had a good point there, and I think that a lot of yeah, I mean, especially out here, man, it's one of those things where I think for a lot of kids who are the minority, and I mean, it's tough, bro. It's straight up like it's something where you really have to sometimes like be comfortable being uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and sometimes you don't even realize that, right? Because you grow up, like you said, you grew up around here, right? So sometimes it doesn't really hit you right away because you're just growing up in it,
Yeah.
right? But then maybe once you become aware of it, then it's like, whoa, or maybe you go somewhere else, like you said with basketball, right? You can, you know, travel to different states, go to different cities, and then you look and you're like, oh snap, I didn't know it looked like that out here. Oh, damn, more of us out here than oh, snap. Okay, oh they do got a,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, they do got a Panamanian restaurant around here, but it's like where. Yeah, like but then when you come back, and then all of a sudden, then it might hit you a little bit more. Where it's like, oh snap, I really can't. Yeah, I don't really see that. Yeah, it's different. So sometimes that wake up call comes just from that,
Yeah.
you know. But I think again, like it's what you do with that wake up call, right? 'Cause sometimes you can sit amongst yourself and kind of be like, this kind of sucks, like, you know. And what happens? I think a lot of people where they're just like, all right, well, I'm gonna go over there. This is what I'm wanting and
Yeah.
things like that. But what I would tell anybody is, you know, everywhere should be your home. Make it like never feel like you have to go somewhere else to get comfortable.
Yeah.
Like where you are, where you were born, that's your home.
Yeah.
And don't let nobody drive you out. Don't let nobody make you so uncomfortable where you don't want to be there. No, like that's your home. That could be your home too. Anywhere could be your home.
Yeah.
Because truly home is where your heart is, and if you really establish yourself as being an individual, can't nobody make you feel you know any sort of way about being where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, that actually brought like a memory of myself. Now that I think about it, sort of going back to the other questions you were asking, I definitely think like growing up for me, like I was saying, without much like growing up with around a lot of African Americans, I definitely took I think my Iranian side more, just because I saw a lot of them in school, was able to talk with them, share the language, the food, the culture. So that one definitely stuck out to me more. But talking about playing basketball, other places I went and played basketball in North Carolina one time. Met my guys Drew and Matthew. Shout out to you guys, and they were from Pittsburgh. So we both came. I'm from Pittsburgh. Me from SoCal to Durham to play at Duke, and that was like completely
Oh,
like,
that's different.
yeah. It like brought like straight culture like out of me, because it was like okay, I don't have to just sit and represent one side of myself or only align with one side of myself because now I see what it's like to share similarities with other people.
Mm.
So them like they're from a pretty diverse area within Pittsburgh, so they see pretty equal amount of African Americans and Caucasian people. So like they saw the best like sort of best of both worlds. I was really just more immersed in Caucasian and Iranian communities, and then we both came to a predominantly black area. So we like all I think kind of grew and sort of saw what it's like to meet other people and not have to feel like you can only represent one side of yourself or only be yourself around your own kind of people. But definitely, I think between like code switching or changing your personality. Like there's a lot of that I think in African American culture sometimes because
Oh,
it's not
we can tap into that. Yeah.
yeah because it's not always accepted to talk a certain way or you know act a way because other may see it as improper or strange. But that definitely I think showed to me and hopefully to them too that you don't have to sort of hide a certain part of yourself just because you're not around your own people.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm glad I was gonna say. I'm glad we touching in on that, man, because you know what? That's one thing I would probably say is probably one of the biggest, right? When you come from, so we'll use it as an example, right? You come from an area where you're like the minority, right? And then you go to another area where it's like, oh snap, like, there's more of me. And you go out there, sometimes we'll be real, like sometimes amongst your own people you don't even feel accepted,
Yeah.
right? Because you're like, oh you ain't talking to, you don't carry the culture, right? And that's I seen that with a lot of different African Americans, Mexicans, like if you go somewhere and you don't speak I'm Mexican, but I don't speak Spanish, and it's like I don't know if you're really Mexican, like or things like that, right? And it should never be like that. It should always be where, again, it's like, nah, you should never have to feel uncomfortable being yourself.
Yeah.
Like you should be like, all right, like you represented just by you from your family, from how that in itself represents it.
Yeah.
It ain't just like, oh, you don't have to talk a certain way. You don't have to, oh, I gotta wear my clothes a certain way to. I don't believe in any of that stuff. I believe that and that's probably some I think for a lot of the youth they probably experience, is that where it's like that pressure of man I gotta make sure I mesh into my culture, but in reality, you already meshed in whether you speak the language, whether you wear your clothes a certain way, you already they can't take you from being black.
Yeah.
Like there's you gonna be that to the day you die, right? And so, regardless, you is represented, But I'm glad you touched on that because I think that, I was gonna ask you too, like how was that, right? You go out to certain areas, sometimes, you might be like, oh, because you don't talk a certain way or
Yeah.
you don't dress a certain way, and then it's like, damn, now amongst my own people, I feel like I'm being ostracized,
Yeah.
right? And so there's also that factor where some people might, they might experience that too.
Yeah. No, for sure. Like definitely being here sometimes it's like sort of not in a negative way, but too black for me to be like Persian or to be regular in Orange County because that's just not a lot of black people that speak Farsi or are Afro-Iranian. It's really rare. So I only know a few. But then I go to Central Valley and then it's like we're not really fully black either because I'm not around all the time to really talk the same way my grandmother talks or dress the way my uncles dress. So it's definitely like, why are you not just like us? And it's like, well, I can't be. It's sometimes it's not possible. Especially synthesizing two completely different cultures. You know, a Baptist African American family and a completely Muslim family that came from the Middle East. Like like there's gonna be some similarities between like the sharing like loving culture and food, but there's going to be a lot of differences. So that definitely sort of taps into like you said, not being able to feel like you can't fit in 100% and that you have to switch how you act. But I think it's just taking in who you are as a person. Take yourself for who you are. Don't feel like you said like you have to change or talk away to be accepted to a group, whether it's you're talking to a teacher at school or you're talking to a coach. Be who you are, the same person all the time.
Mhm.
Authenticity, I think, is the most important thing because if we're all trying to be the same, then we're going to be bland. We're going to be monotone, right? Like you said, New York City melting pot. Not everyone's trying to be the same. We're all different cultures, and people are interacting with each other so you can grow and gain other ideas. But like you said, if we're all trying to, like, if I'm just trying to speak and sound just Persian or fit in with Caucasian people, then I'm not going to do my culture or them a service by like sharing myself. They're just going to get sort of like a facade of who I'm trying to be just to feel comfortable within myself.
Mm. Ah, very good point, man. That's again, I'm glad I get like this is a perfect podcast, man. Because I'm gonna tell you straight up, like, being able to talk to the youth, like talk to young African American, right? for me, it's even like I said, it's a blessing to be able to help even with that kind of stuff, right? And to be able to have like the platform to even like be able to reach out to millions, hundreds of kids, and be able to tell them that, right? Because what you're saying is exactly what many, whether it's mixed African Americans, right, or kind of like mom was African American, dad was a different different culture, and they deal with a lot of like cultural identity. It's like a cultural identity crisis,
For sure.
and that stuff can be. I mean, it could make you definitely be uncomfortable, and so I'm glad. Like again, like this is an awesome platform to talk about that because that's something where I would love for like the youth, right? I can reach out to them and tell them like, hey, look, like you know, you don't like you said, you don't have to fit yourself into one box. I don't have to be Iranian. I don't have to just be, you know, African American, right? Like no, like as general as a people, like we're meant to learn. Like that's what we're meant. We're meant to learn everybody. We're not meant to just be one. So yeah, that's probably been one of the things I've seen amongst our own culture, amongst other cultures, is that kind of like I'll say like within ourselves, like cultural shaming
Yeah.
because you're not black enough, you're not, you don't do this, right? And I'm sorry, that's all. I mean, that's all just it's all BS, man. It's just like where you don't have to fit into one box to be who you are, what your culture is, you know. So yeah, I'm glad we touched on that, man, because that's something that I think for a lot of kids, like they really need to hear. Like, hey, like, no, you need to fit in one box. You just need to be a good person, right? Just be a good person, and that itself will unite everybody. They ain't just being a certain way. It's you gotta be a good person just in general.
Yeah. And if you had any like final thoughts or sort of if you had something to say like directly to the Black African American Afro Latino youth, whether it's a quote anything, what would that be? For the final message.
Be a paver, pave ways, right? Create opportunities, and the way in which you do that, again, being a great person, educate yourself, learn about your community, whether you're in your community amongst yourself or you're in a community where maybe you're the minority. Learn about it, right? Learn about how money works. Learn about what's going on, because again, like that's what's gonna really elevate you to really know how to help everybody else. And one thing I always say is stick to your own script. Stick to your own script. Don't follow anybody else's script, right? I might have had my way of doing things, which is great, but you have your way of doing things, which is great too. We're all great in ourselves. So never feel like you have to follow somebody else to be great. Like God made no mistakes when he created you. So again, like we're all like snowflakes. We're all different shape sizes, all of that. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with you, with how you are. And again, pave your own way, create your own story, because it's always gonna be a beautiful story.
Yeah. Thank you for paving the way, being the first person on the podcast.
Most
It
def.
is great time talking to you. Shout out
Man.
to Czar Training, Astroflix for filming. This is Uncut Roots podcast, unfiltered conversations with Black leaders and athletes, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Yes, sir.
Perfect, bro.
Yeah. Did that, huh?
I mean,